Here we are at 7:30. Start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start the meeting, I'd like to extend some condolences. First, to the family of James Ellis. Mr. Ellis served in the United States Navy during Vietnam War. He retired as head custodian of Bridgewater Williams School. Mr. Ellis passed on 17th of March, 2019. Condolences forwarded to the family of Cornelius A. McLaughlin upon his passing on March 12, 2019. Mr. McLaughlin served in the United States Army during the Korean War. I'd also like to have a moment of silence. Thank you. To remind everybody that this is being recorded live, and then we can, of course, visit it for future reference and historical purposes. Get a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. There are no announcements from the president. However, we do have proclamations. It's a proclamation for Lisa Bazell-Curley and Jeff Fowler. Whereas Lisa Bazell-Curley and Jeff Fowler have been mainstays on the Bridgewater 4th of July committee, whereas they and the entire 4th of July committee have put on exceptional 4th of July events for many years. Whereas the entire committee is a private volunteer organization which raises private donations to fund the entire day of activities on July 4th. Now, therefore, the town of Bridgewater wishes to acknowledge and thank these two tremendous volunteers for all of their work on behalf of the community and extends its hopes that they are able to continue well into the future.
All right.
Thank you. Well, I didn't know. I thought I was going to update you guys.
Shall I give you Jeff's as well?
Yeah, I'll give it to him. I wish I had known I would have made him come. Thank you very much. Oh, you guys are going to make me work.
Thank you.
That's the easiest part of it.
Mr. President, I'd make a motion to take item J out of order so that we can let Mrs. Curley move along.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
I'd make a motion to take item J out of order.
Item J?
I'll second that.
You want me to stay up?
Okay,
now?
motion made and seconded to take item J out of order. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so item J. Discussions of 4th of July committee update from Councilor Fitzgibbons.
I just asked Ms. Curley and obviously Mr. Buellin, there's a whole ton of volunteers, as we know, and everyone works so hard at it, that to come in, it's getting to be that time where it's crunch time. You guys need more volunteers, and you're going to need some donations, so I want you to be able to give a pitch, and anyone on the council to ask you about things and get things done.
All right, so real quick, last year we came in, we did not reach our budget goal, which was $30,000, and we actually spent a little bit more than that. Fortunately, in the past few years, we've given ourselves a little bit of a head start, so we still were able to pay the bills, but we are a little behind. So last year, they came in at a little over $30,000 to put the day off. That covers the parade and the fireworks. So our biggest expenses obviously are pyrotechnics, police department, and the fire department. And as you guys know, the town doesn't pay for any of it. So currently, it's me, Jeff, a gentleman named Norm. Keith joined us last year, and Nancy Wood has joined us this year. So that's 5 of us. Our big fundraiser is the letters that we put out every year. They went out about 2 weeks ago. So far, we've gotten $2,700 committed for the day so far. Clearly, that leaves us far behind. But we anticipate quite a bit more. We are working on a T-shirt. For the last few years, we've had a T-shirt contest. It brings in very few, I'm at a loss for words, sorry. Very few, we ask the community to submit designs. They have to be patriotic, they should have the year on it, and they should have the name Bridgewater on it. And we take submissions from anybody, then we vote on them to see what design becomes the T-shirt of the year, and we sell those for $10 a piece, which I think is pretty economical. We try to keep it affordable, but still make a little bit of money off it. We'd love to see more of the high school possibly get involved in that, or even the seniors. We usually get maybe 9 or 10, if that, entries every year. Yeah, it's very poor. We're not sure. Because there's so few of us, it's hard to get the word out, but we do our best. We're also doing a national anthem contest. We started that last year. We don't make money off it, but we have the people submit a video via YouTube, and it can be emailed to Lisa at BridgewaterMass4th.com. And then we chose last year the person who was going to sing the national anthem. That was more just because we were using the same person in the past, and we have a big community, and we wanted to open it up and let anybody. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Bridgewater. I mean, we have people that come from East Bridgewater, West Bridgewater, all kinds of towns. So, in addition to that, for fundraising, we'll be putting out some canisters in some local stores and restaurants. I'm still working on a list of them. I had my notebook, but it's back there, but I'm working on it. Can you think of anything else?
No, the only thing to say is, our town shines a few days a year, and this is one of the shiniest days we have. It's the 4th of July, and it's mostly because of this woman and Jeff, who have just carried the torch, and a few of us that have been helping out. But we're one of the few towns left that celebrate as big as we do, and we get visitors from all over, communities from all around us that come. And it's just a day, like I said, that makes Bridgewater stand out. So we're hoping the businesses continue to stand up for us. We're hoping that the citizens who enjoy the festivities have in the past, or new citizens, will help out. There will be cans all over the town, and the letters are out. We have a Facebook page, and just word of mouth is the big thing. To get it out, but we can't continue to have multiple years in a row where we overspend. The project will, the event will end at some point. So this year's a big year. We don't want to go back to back into our small amount of reserves. Not trying to scare people, not trying to, force people to give, but we're just saying that we really need everybody's help, because it is just a fully private funded event. But it's a great event. It's a great day in Bridgewater from beginning to end of the day. It's just one of those days that you go back into your home and after the fireworks, and you sit down and you say, wow, this is my town, and today it was my town. And that's why I got involved, and we can also use more volunteers. But if we don't get them, we'll do it.
Yeah. We meet the first Tuesday of every month at 5 o'clock at BTV. We find the big reason a lot of people don't want to volunteer is because nobody wants to work on that day. But you get the greatest parking spot. You're right there. You get to see the fireworks. It's not a bad thing.
Tim?
And what's that?
I called you Tim instead of Mr. Fitzgibbons. Let's be formal.
That's fine, Edward. So just to reiterate, you guys are all private fundraiser, private committee, just doing your thing to do the best for the town. Mm-hmm. And, I'm just worried a lot of folks who pay attention here, pay attention on Facebook, think that we somehow are funding any part of it, and we're not.
There are still a lot of people that think that, though. You're
And,
correct.
and, you know, it's important to say that as much as we can, and that if you love the 4th of July as much as I hear most people do, get involved. Get involved with the committee in just a very, very small way. That's all you need to do. Every little bit helps, right?
Absolutely.
And so, you know, donate $5, donate $2.
Well, if you think, if it's approximately 30,000 to do this, a little more, and we're in, you know, if we had $1 for every person that lived in town, we almost wouldn't have to fundraise at all, so.
Thank you.
I just have to first make one comment that I
The shirts?
I
Get
took a
rid of
picture
his.
of you guys right off the bat because we've got a Montreal Canadiens jersey next to a Bruins jersey, people working on the same team. It's amazing what the world can do when you come together, isn't it?
That's right, right?
I'd like to reiterate that, to Mr. Fitzgibbon's point, that you are not part of a budget line item, so we will not talk about you in our budget and finance meetings at all, unless we're talking about the excitement that we get from going to the parade. My 3 years on this seat and participating from behind the banner has been a unique view that I had never had in my life, and I've watched the parade, and every year we've had the fireworks, I've been here. And my son is the unofficial grand master of the parade the last 3 years. I can't imagine not having it. I'm shocked that you don't get tons of participants and entrants for the artwork for the T-shirt. So that's one thing I think we could publicize, is that from my family, so, well, they'll have a fine design. There's going to be thousands of them. That's my assumption, and the head of my family. So you're probably going to get 5 from the Haleys.
It works.
And 3 will be from me. So it's great, and it's very appropriate that you guys are here so we can give you some accolades, and I'm just want to keep it going as much as possible, and anything we can do to help take our public forum and do that. Mr. Wood.
It's great. I was actually thinking the opposite with seeing the 2 jerseys. You have a fundraiser right in front of you. You don't even know it, right? It's a family show, so we won't. So I think that there's 2 important things, as everyone's reiterated. The town, you know, through our public safety budget, doesn't help you. And, you know, wish we could, but it can't happen. But I think a lot of people assume that, so maybe we can work to get the message out that, hey, maybe they should, you know, donate to simply buy a share of public safety at the fireworks, you know? But I agree with everybody. It's an awesome event. It always reminds me of that even though we've grown in size over the decades, we can act like a small town and have fun like a small town. And I would encourage, even, and Keith's involved in funding, you know, committee members for the town. I think maybe if we could find a couple more members to help you out too. You know, I'm in a couple of fundraising things like everybody else, and it's always, the more volunteers you get, the more ideas you get, the more fundraising you get, and it works out better. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
All right, I would like to say one more thing.
Sure.
His wife Carol is a huge help, and I would really be remiss. My husband really does a great deal, even though he's not technically on the committee. If I go home without mentioning him, I'll be in trouble. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you, guys. Okay, second section of discussions. Town Council letter to Senator Pacheco and State Representative D'Amelia regarding prison mitigation. Shall I read this out loud, or would you like to go right into discussions? Why don't I read it for public consumption? Dear Senator Pacheco and Representative D'Amelia, at the Bridgewater Town Council meeting held March 12, 2019, the Town Council unanimously requested your assistance in securing additional state funding to offset the burdens on the town of Bridgewater for hosting the Department of Corrections facilities. While the town is very appreciative of the funding, as it receives as part of the supplemental budget over the past years, the council is concerned that the amounts have not come close to meeting the cumulative costs associated with being a host community. The council appreciates all your assistance in securing past funds, and we look forward to being helpful in securing additional funding. We would also like to understand the formula used by the state to disperse the funds that are appropriated in the supplemental budget to the eligible towns. Thank you in advance for any help you may be able to provide. Respectfully, Edward Haley, Council President. Open now for discussion.
Motion to send.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, open for discussion. No discussion, those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Excellent.
Nice job.
Now we move back to the order on citizens' open forum. If you'd like to come up and say anything, come on up, state your name and address. Nobody coming up for citizens' open forum. We move to appointments. Having no appointments, move on to hearings. So first hearing, 746, petition 2019-006, joint pole location for National Grid and Verizon on Gatsby Drive, pole 22 and 220. So we are now open for that. I need, is the petitioner present? Petitioner is present. First, I'd like, before you come up, sir, I'd like to ask for general questions from the public in regards to this. No questions as of yet. Public speaking in favor? Seeing none. Public speaking in opposition? Seeing none. Now we could have the petitioners come up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Simon Young. I'm a National Grid engineer, and I'm talking to the contractor that's heading this job. It's a 3-lot underground residential development. So at the beginning of Gatsby Drive, currently there's no pole. So we'll be needing a pole to go underground from that pole and feed into the 3 lots.
Any questions for the councilors at this point? Excellent. No questions from the councilors. Just one for myself. So that's the lines being fed down, you said underground, so that is going directly into the ground from that pole and not being strung to other poles within that development?
Correct. It will go straight underground.
Okay.
And right now, I think the road is not fully paved out yet. So once it's up to the contractor to be providing all the underground conduits and stuff for us.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Yeah, close the hearing at 7:48. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor, roll call vote on that.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving to the next, open this at 7:49, FY 19049, coincidentally. Transfer order, other one-time unforeseen expenses. So would Mr. Town Manager be our petitioner for this?
Sure, I can give you a little update on this one. This transfer is requesting funds coming out of other one-time stabilization funds. So in other words, funds set aside for one-time issues that we have. And these $121,490 would fund $30,000 for additional master plan, comprehensive plan funding in order to finalize the comprehensive plan into a master plan with a word just went out of my head. anyway, finalize the master plan. We had an investigative matter concerning a personnel matter that cost us $23,140. We had an assessment, community assessment contract for $8,350, and we've got a $60,000 request to do a complete salary compensation and classification update for our non-public safety employees, and also the first compensation classification assessment for our public safety employees, and that totals $121,490.
Thank you. General public, have any questions? Public speaking in favor or opposition? Any questions from the council? Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, I have a few questions. I was the dissenting vote on the Budget and Finance Committee because I had a lot of questions and issues with this. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and hopefully I'll vote yes now. But one concern that I do have is that it looks like the $91,000 amount is actually three separate issues in that amount of money. There's the legal fee issue that you got to resolve, and there's the comprehensive plan, wage and classification plan you want to which I was aware of, but tonight was the first time that I heard of an $8,000 assessment. Can you just, number one, can you explain what the $800,000 assessment is for and who we got it from?
The $8,000 was Great Blue Community Assessment, and that was a contract that we had pursuant to the strategic planning process, which is still going on, and that was to do the comprehensive community survey that we conducted back in August, September, I believe it was.
Okay, and then the $30,000 for the master plan, we already did an RFP, and we have a company working now on the master plan. And when you came to an agreement of a price, was that a fluid price, where are they doing something more than the RFP asked for, or how did that come about?
So originally, we had gone out looking for a company or professional services to work strictly on zoning, and we had estimates at that time that to just address our zoning was going to cost in the neighborhood of $120,000 to $130,000. So we went out, we secured the help of Attorney Bobrowski, who you've heard mentioned in other meetings. His price was low enough that it allowed us to couple the zoning update with a comprehensive plan update. We very purposely called it a comprehensive plan update because we didn't have enough money to actually complete that to the level of a master planning, what we could call a master plan, which is defined in state law. So recognizing that, and being surprised that we were able to get that much work for the amount of money that we had set aside, we then asked, okay, if we wanted to get to the master plan, complete master plan, an complete updated master plan, which was last done in 2002 or 2003, what additional monies would that involve? And we got an estimate of $25,000 to $28,000. So so the additional 30 gives us comprehensive, updated master plan that we can then use moving forward. So it's, instead of trying to piecemeal zoning, comprehensive plan, another amount of money later on to try to do a little bit more and a little bit more, we have the opportunity to have one set of consultants do the whole body of work and at the end of it, give us an actual completed master plan and a completed updated book of zoning. So that's essentially what's in front of you now.
Okay, I can see those three things being unforeseen to some extent, but one of the things that I don't think as a councilman that is unforeseen, and that is the $60,000 for the wage and compensation classification study. I do think that that is something that could be budgeted or could have been put in some of the capital. I don't even know, I don't even consider it a capital need, to be honest with you, but it's in a capital fund that we can spend money on to do something like this. That's okay. But as I said before, the wage and compensation package that we currently have was approved in 2015, implemented for fiscal 18. And I understand that public safety was not included in that. I understand that. And I'd be very interested to see if this is approved, what it looks like when it comes back regarding how public safety fits into all this, because I do think their negotiating strategies are a little different to some extent. So this is, what we have is really not that old, in my opinion. What it does probably need is some updating, but not a comprehensive, in my view. So if this is approved and you put out the RFP, I hope that it's, something that you want to update. I don't know if 60,000 would be enough, or maybe we can get away with 25,000, but I just think that that is not unforeseen, in my opinion. That is something that we could have planned for in a normal budgetary process or in the capital budget if it qualifies under that. So that is my struggle, and it's not separated. I really think that these should have been separated into separate line items so we can see you need 8,000 to pay this, you need 20,000 to do that, and you want 60,000 to do that. Those are some of my concerns. So and I'll let my colleagues speak too, but I'll probably support this anyway.
Mr. Combols, do you have something?
I think Mr. Gallagher raises an interesting point in that, in a way, not capital expenses, but organizational expenses, like running a department, there might be a cost that you incur every 10 years. And so what's the best way for you as the town manager to budget for that? I mean, it's like with a house, you should ideally budget, if you need a new roof every 30 years, ideally you're putting away whatever every year in every year's budget to kind of save up for what seem like capital expenses in terms of being one big hit, but not an annual thing. So I'm wondering, I think Mr. Gallagher raises an interesting point. Is there some other mechanism through which you can sort of create a separate fund, kind of almost a protected fund for those sorts of sort of multi-year costs? And that's a longer term question, I think. And it might make sense to pass this now, but look to other methods of paying these costs in the future.
Mr. Wood and then Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, we talked a little bit about that in the budget committee. So I think we're taking the strategy that you're talking about, Councilor Columbatis, which is the other one-time stabilization is one of the multiple stabilization accounts that we've set up. Other ones being for specific use of, in terms of, I can't think of what they all are right now, but so this one is for those one-time things that happen every once in a while. So, our finance director was at the meeting and he explained the funding behind this, and I do kind of agree, and we'll talk about this. Maybe the line items should have been broken out in more detail, so it was easier to see, or at least some context behind it. But so this account is kind of set up for that savings account that you can't keep in the operational because it's not an annual piece. So personally, I wasn't concerned about the source. We did talk a little bit about the amounts, whether 60,000 for a compensation study was a worthwhile investment, and the discussion was ended. Pretty much it was, because it gives you a fair judgment about what other communities are doing with their contracts and their non-contract personnel, and where the trends are for that item. So I think, I don't know if the town manager can explain the stabilization account any better than that, but That's my understanding of the use anyway.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Just to follow up on Mr. Columbotus's question, and going back to my days being on the Board of Assessors, we have, as a town, an obligation to do a revaluation of all the properties in the town every 3 years. And so I believe this still carries through to this day. What happened was there was a special expense line item, a 103, for those of you who remember 103s back in the day, that would accrue a third of the cost, and then it would be protected for the next year, and then a third of the cost, and then a third of the cost, so that you knew it was coming every 3 years, and you accrued that cost, and you did it. And I think that's very, very prudent budgeting procedure. So I completely agree with that. And just to follow up on Mr. Wood around the compensation study, I think it's vitally important that we do this, maybe not as often as Mr. Gallagher may have portrayed it, but that we do this with some regularity so that we know that, you know, we're paying the folks who work for us at a rate that is consistent with the market all around us. We don't want to be so far over or so far under that we look crazy. So, you know, that's important to me. Timing can always be debated, but in general, I'm in favor of doing those. And in fact, I'd expand it out beyond just pay, but to total benefits, and to say, all right, so are we also including health insurance, and what percentage of health insurance we pay, what level of health insurance we pay, other fringe benefits, so that we have, as a council, a full understanding of what are the personnel costs of the entire town, and how does that line up with towns in our similar situation. So, just my thoughts.
Mr. George.
Through you to Mr. Dutton. So, just out of curiosity, when was the last time we did a salary compensation survey?
I think Councilor Gallagher is about right. We used data from fiscal 2014 that was used to do a study that was presented to us in fiscal 2015. I think at the time I mentioned to the council that data was going to be used as we move forward with a variety of different collective bargaining negotiations, and our effort and certainly my goal was to get people onto a consistent classification and compensation matrix. So we were able to do that with all the general government employees. We have yet to do that with public safety employees, and so I think part of this, this study would do that, would give us, you know, a proposed matrix and a lot of information about where we stand in the universe of our peers in terms of salary, compensation, and benefits, as Councilor Fitzgibbons points out. So I'd only add that I do agree with Councilor Gallagher that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We've already gone through this, so we've got the data from the 2014-2015 study. We don't have to reinvent the wheel in that regard, but we do need to account for benefits. So the original study we did back then did not account for benefits, and as I think all the councilors know, benefits can be a very costly proposition for the town and a true benefit for the employees. So we want to make sure that, again, we're not outside of the universe in what we offer in terms of benefits, certainly as it relates to salaries as well.
Okay, so just two follow-up things. One, once this survey is done, it'll cover all of the town employees that we currently have, correct? Okay. And then is it a norm for this particular survey, which is, in my view, fairly expensive, $60,000 is nothing to sneeze at, is it the norm for it to be outdated 5 years after you get the results?
Short answer is yes. 5 to 8 years, I think you want to go back out and update it. But again, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. There are some towns that will spend $120,000, $130,000 and do, a very full-blown analysis. We're not proposing that. Ours is fairly simple and straightforward. We want to know where we stand in terms of salary. First and foremost, we want to know where we stand in terms of health insurance. We want to know where we stand in terms of other benefits that we offer, vacation, personal days, sick days, and those sorts of things.
Sick leave buyback.
Sick leave buyback.
Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher, did you have something else?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a final point is that I think that there's a lot of things that were mentioned here tonight. Not everything. Some things are going to require a consultant and professional help. But I do think there are some things that can be done internally with the staff that we have. Because in fiscal 18, when we adjusted about 7 or 8 positions in this town with some decent increases in pay because of that study. And yeah, I think a study needs to be done every so often, but I don't know of any town that does one every 5 years at all. But I think a lot of the things regarding benefits and so forth could probably be researched in-house. When I was trying to increase the town clerk's salary, I was told, and I did an awful lot of phone calls, got on the way, I did an awful lot of research to present spreadsheets, and so did Councilor Wood. We did a lot of work on our own to present to you guys, this is what's out there. We didn't have a consultant do that for us, for that position, although that position is in the wage and compensation package. So I think there are some things that can be done in-house. Write the RFP how you wish. I'll looking forward to seeing it when it comes here. And hopefully we can get a presentation when it's done. I don't think we did get one for the 2015 one.
Other questions? I would like to say that I think it's probably going to be a little bit deeper than one person that we're going to be having the compensation study on. I don't know how many employees that's going to cover, but quite a bit more than the town clerk. So if you guys want to take that on.
No, I'm just saying that that's what I did for one position, one person for one position.
Any other questions from the councilors? Close this hearing at 8:08. Entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Made by Mr. Souza, seconded by Mr. Wood. And that will go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you. Now remaining at 8:08, we go into transfer order of capital appropriations order FY 19-050. I don't know if the town manager want to go into explanation for this one.
Mr. President, I'd be happy to. This transfer requests a transfer of essentially already appropriated funds to the tune of $49,405. We are reallocating some of these capital funds. There was $38,230 left over from other DPW purchases and improvements, and the roadway superintendent has requested that we reallocate towards the replacement of a smaller truck that is used all year round every day. And then $11,175 was originally appropriated for the Bridgewater Fire Department for an off-road vehicle. by the time that the money was approved and the quote went out, the amount that vehicle cost had increased substantially, so the fire chief would like to reallocate those funds in order to purchase a thermal imaging camera for multiple purposes.
Thank you. General questions from the public? Public speaking in favor, public speaking in opposition. And now to our counselors for questions. Mr. Wood.
I'll just review because you didn't ask. I think I spoke about this. Budget and Finance supported this 3-0, and I think Finance has also supported it.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I just want to highlight under the explanation here in regard to the truck. This capital appropriation allows for the purchase of a replacement flatbed box truck with interchangeable box to replace a currently unusable truck. Mr. Columbotus's point earlier about putting things into the budget and maybe putting them away for a couple of years so that we can buy things and not do this, patchwork stuff. It makes it infuriates me that we have unusable trucks for the highway department. It's unacceptable to me. And if this is the best way to get it up and going right away, that's fine. I get it, but we can't just keep putting Band-Aids on the highway department. We all know that. So I'm just venting. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgibbons. Other comments? You'll close the hearing at 8:12. And I would like to entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve. Let's go to that roll call.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Thank you. Committee reports.
Town manager report?
I'm sorry, did I miss that? Did you go? Oh, yeah. I went down past J. My apologies, everyone. No license transactions tonight or presentations. But what we do have is a town manager's report.
Afraid I can't live up to that billing. I have 5 items this evening. First item, I just want to let the council know, we received our Chapter 90 allocation, which is our highway funds from the state. We've received $713,836 for this fiscal year. That is slightly below what we've gotten in prior years, but not significantly below what we've gotten in prior years. So we are looking forward to the potential of a supplemental state budget that will increase our total amount, but we'll see where that comes. But $713,836. I just want to give the council an update. I think some or all of you got an email from a rightly concerned resident on Vernon Street about a potential project in Middleborough. It's a potential warehouse project that has been talked about. I don't even want to say proposed because the Middleborough Planning Board has not received an application as of yet. But a discussed warehouse of roughly 1 million square feet. That would be off of Route 44, between Route 44 and 495 in Middleborough, and the warehouse itself would roughly border 495. The issue that the resident had, and certainly we are keeping an eye on, is access. Originally, there was some discussion that the company building this proposed potential warehouse wanted to use Vernon Street as an access because they were being told that 44 was not an option. With a little research that our planning assistant planner had done, we realized, or Middleborough actually told us that, that they were not in favor, for natural heritage reasons, we're not in favor of a direct access from the property to a new, essentially what would be basically a new curb cut on Route 44. So that the company at that point had said, okay, well, perhaps Vernon Street is going to be our best option. Obviously, that presents enormous issues in neighborhoods both in Middleborough and Bridgewater. So what we have been told is that the company recognizes the tremendous pushback, mostly from Middleborough at this point, and is now proposing to use another access back out onto Route 44, so would not be using Vernon Street. Again, this is all a little bit of conjecture because it's there's no proposal in front of the Middleborough Planning Board. The only official step this project has taken is a request for wetland delineation from the Conservation Commission in Middleborough. So I just wanted to give you that update. We don't see, at this point, again, Middleborough hasn't heard anything. They were told by the company that they may be ready to file within a week or so, and that was back in February, and they've heard nothing from the company. So that is where that stands. But obviously, we will keep a very close eye on that potential project, just to make sure that it doesn't adversely impact our residential streets. So a very quick update on the Mitchell School. The Mitchell School Building Committee met last night, and I can tell you, relay the same thing that the committee heard. The preferred schematic report was submitted to the MSBA on February 20th, and if you recall, that the preferred schematic was essentially a tear down and a rebuilding of the Mitchell School on its current site. That was presented to the MSBA, as I say, on February 20th. I attended, along with the superintendent and the architect and the OPM, attended a MSBA Facilities Assessment Subcommittee meeting on March 13th to discuss that preferred schematic report. The MSBA subcommittee had some questions for us at that meeting, and I thought we handled those questions very well. And we will also be responding. They had some written questions, follow-up questions after that, and the architect will be responding, and the OPM will be responding to those, mostly technical questions. As an aside, the committee signed a memorandum of understanding with National Grid, which would allow the district to participate in the National Grid's integrated design path for larger building program. So obviously with National Grid, that's a energy saving program that we'll be working with National Grid on. So the upcoming milestones, again, just a reminder, the school, we're not close to breaking ground. People will have to go to the ballot to approve the funding for this, so I don't want people to think that this is all a done deal. There are a lot of people doing a lot of hard work to complete the plan, but this is only another step in that process. The upcoming dates, the MSBA board meets on April 10th. We expect the MSBA subcommittee, Facilities Assessment Committee, to make a positive recommendation to their full board and approve our preferred solution. Once that happens, we move into the schematic design phase, and we have a deadline of July 10th to make the first submission under the schematic design phase, and then again it goes through the MSBA's Facility Assessment Committee, and gets approved presumably at the earliest at their August 28th meeting of the MSBA board. And at that point, if we meet those targets, and I don't expect that we won't, we will be approving a project scope, and a budget agreement, and that agreement is with MSBA. So it's only after all that is completed that we then turn inward and we look towards local funding of that project. And I'm told that after that August 28th approval from the MSBA board, we have 120 days within which to get approval from local voters. So obviously the council has to approve first, and then it goes to the local residents, local voters. So at that point, obviously then, it's either a project or it's not a project, and we move on in some direction after that. But that's just a quick update on the Mitchell School project. Other projects going on, Elm Street has now been fully permitted, and that's the street itself. But also the DeBartolo warehouse project is wrapped up permitting, and both should be scheduled to begin. The DeBartolo project should be scheduled to begin mid to end of April, very early May, and we will not be too far behind that with the Elm Street project. We're looking at a June date to break ground there. And I've already mentioned talked a little bit about the master planning process. On Saturday, we had what I thought was a really good session, billed as the comprehensive master planning session. We tried to put it out on Facebook Live, and we did. We put out the first 45 minutes or so on Facebook Live. Had a pretty good reaction to that. We had a decent turnout, and I think it was a very productive session, so I'm hoping that folks that have traditionally not been involved in town before sort of feel free to come out and voice their opinions at the next two sessions that we have after this, or at the meetings that we're going to be holding, or at the different parts of town events where there'll be a presence from the committee. So as I say, it was a lot of good input and valuable input in pursuant to our efforts to get this master planning completed. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Questions for the town manager? Mr. George.
Thank you, through you, to the town manager. First question, so it's been a while. Have we gotten any more insight into finding out why the charter changes came back as one question from the legislature?
I can't remember if I reported this back to the council or not, but my understanding is that there were so many pieces of so many changes to the existing charter, so many proposed changes to the existing charter, that it was not going to be feasible, and again, I'm getting this second, third hand, but not going to be feasible to try to create different questions because changes in one part of the charter were somewhat dependent on changes in the other part of the charter, and vice versa. So that's about the best that I got, best answer I got from there.
Okay. So I get, depending on how the vote goes, it'll probably be a best practice to have a little bit of a different approach if we have to go back to the legislature in regards to changing the charter. Okay. Second thing is, and I'm probably going to do this, I'm going to look for guidance from the president or yourself. So the regional school agreement, does anyone know what April 28th will be of this year? It'll be the 20th anniversary of the last time it was amended. So I think what I will sponsor, or if whatever needs to be sponsored, is we have to form a committee to dive into that agreement with our partners in Raynham and get it updated, not only to reflect the current school system, but also there are probably things in there that are antiquated, that don't belong, and there's probably some other things in there that have to be changed pretty quickly. that is going to impact both towns in various forms. So I'll work on it this week with whomever I need to get that going. It's not going to really have an effect for this budget season, but I'm hoping once we lay out kind of what we did for the building committee, a project plan of when we have to meet, when we have to finalize, when we have to submit to whomever, which I'm going on assumption would have to go up to the State House to someone, having it sent back to us, and then, again, my assumption is both towns will have to vote to approve it or not approve it, and then implement it from there as well. But I knew it was old. I didn't realize it hadn't been touched in 20 years. So I'll work on that for the next meeting as well. Hopefully, people that are watching this right now or watching it on video will gain an interest in this, because this is, something that obviously it impacts Bridgewater immensely, but it also impacts Raynham as well. And we're going to have to be very cognizant, very straightforward, but working together to put something in place that's beneficial to both sides of that partnership. So I don't know if, is that something I work through you, or do I work through Ted, or what's the procedure for that? I'm assuming we'd have to bring an order, and we're going to have to go through that process.
I'd be absolutely, I'd be very pleased to identify the process, and then at that point, once I do a little research on the process, then I'm happy to get together and come up with how to step forward.
Okay. So that's it for me.
Excellent. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'll defer to Mr.
No, I actually have a question on that subject. Do we have a copy of the current agreement that can be shared right now?
I
Easily?
can work on getting it.
Okay, I'd be interested. Thanks.
Yeah, just to follow up on some school issues. Just to continue my theme that I always bring up every meeting, it's a big game of Mother May I with the state, correct? So we sat down with them and went over with a smaller board the preferred schematic, and they had some questions but were generally receptive. So we expect that will be approved at the April board meeting by the full SBAB or whatever it is, right?
Correct.
And then we've got some work to do, and we got to put in something, for July, and meet again with a small group, and then go to their August meeting, and they'll say, oh, yes, you did a good job. Now you can go forward with a vote, right?
Correct.
All right, then it comes down on the town to vote for it. And that's where it gets a little bit less bureaucratic and more, where are people going to vote? So we have 120 days, which is essentially Christmas, to get a vote done. Is there any talk or discussion about having a vote as sooner rather than later? So that, could you do a second vote if the first vote failed? I'm trying to think ahead and plan for all contingencies here.
I've certainly heard some comments about how a sooner vote would be more helpful, but I haven't heard it in the context of what happens if the vote fails.
Well, I think that and full disclosure, I'm on the school building committee, so when I say we, it's not you guys, it's me being on the school building committee. I think if we had a vote sooner, and for whatever reason it failed, and we were able to identify particular reasons why, or et cetera, maybe those, we can't bring a new proposal forward, obviously, we have to go with the same one, but perhaps some people could be persuaded that, in fact, that the vote they made negatively would probably be better being a positive vote. And so I'd love to know the answer to the question, can we get another vote in? And so would it make sense to vote earlier rather than later, and then be able to, and I don't want any of this to happen, I'm just trying to plan for all contingencies. So then, it's also, speaking of planning for all contingencies, it's my understanding that we've been working with the 8th grade at the high school since the roof collapsed at the Mitchell, under an emergency situation. And I believe the superintendent has said in a public meeting that if the town votes against whatever funding, then then clearly the town would have declared that that emergency is over. There is no emergency. Is that my
Correct.
recollection?
Yep,
Okay.
that's correct.
So, again, trying to do the belt and suspenders approach that a lot of us like to do here, I'd like to get that idea of getting another revote, if it fails for whatever reason, and I hope it doesn't, but also perhaps sooner rather than later, having a town plan outside of the SBA process to even backstop that further, so that we get something back there as fast as we can. That's the most important thing. The best idea we had a ton of people sitting around this table, and everyone had input, and there was spirited debates, and what we've come up with on the preferred schematic report is the best plan for the town, I'm convinced, going forward. But we also have to be prepared. And so I'm just throwing that out there as something for you to look at going forward. I don't need anything right now, but just something to keep in your mind. Thank you.
Any other questions? All set. Excellent. Move through discussions to committee reports. Anybody have committee reports? Mr. Wood?
I think I've reported on everything
What we
we've
did
done
tonight
recently.
was excellent. Moving to legislation for action. Order FY 19051, acceptance of a gift for the Bridgewater Police Department.
Motion to approve? Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
The one item I forgot, tonight, in fact, we voted in the Budget and Finance Committee 3-0 to support this measure.
Brief. Excellent. Okay, so those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
It's a roll call.
Is it? Yes, it is. Look at that. Hey.
Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Counselor. Ann, would you?
I would. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Mr. George.
Yes.
Mr. Chase.
Yes.
Mr. Haley.
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Mr. Wood.
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
8 in favor, none against.
Moving to old business and having no old business, that leads us to new business. Order FY 19052, loan order for upgrade to the wastewater treatment facility.
Mr. President, if it would be in order, I'd like to make a motion to bundle FY 1952, 53, and 54 into one motion and refer to the Budget and Finance Committees after we hear from the town manager on each.
If I can, because I'm going to have to step out of the room for 53, but I'd like to speak about 52.
But I'll bundle 52 and 54 together.
52 and 54 is, sure.
Okay, so right now it's 52 and 54, and there's a motion on that.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Discussion?
For
I
discussion.
had discussion
Yeah.
for
Oh, that,
52.
Just to bundle them together.
Yeah.
just to bundle
Oh,
them
just to
together, yes.
bundle them together?
Yes.
Is that
We
it?
didn't
Okay,
approve.
so,
fine. So we're bundling to move to the committees?
Yes.
All right, fine. Aye.
okay.
So I'm good on that. Now we can move on.
Okay, so you're good with 52 and 54 moving to
Did we want to hear
No,
from the
that was
town
to bundle
manager?
them together, right?
to bundle them together, yes.
Not to move them yet.
We'll have the town manager run through 52 and 54.
Mr. President, loan order 52 is certainly not insignificant, so I don't want it to get too lost in the process. And so folks that can't see this at home, it's a request to raise and appropriate $32 million for the purpose of financing the design and construction of upgrades to the town's existing wastewater treatment facility, which is located at the end of Morris Avenue. This is money that we knew we'd have to spend. I think the council's been well aware of this since the Environmental Protection Agency's more stringent discharge the discharge permit that had more stringent nitrogen and phosphorus thresholds in it came out. This is very common throughout this part of Massachusetts, and certainly within the watershed. Middleborough is facing a similar thing. The DOC is facing similar issues, but regardless, it requires a substantial upgrade to our plant. And so this $32 million is a little bit on the early side because we won't actually be drawing off this for a bit of time. However, it's important that this get voted because it qualifies us for favorable state funding if the council approves this. And we can say in our applications that the funding has already been appropriated. So essentially, this modernizes all of the older systems down at the plant. It provides odor control, upgrades the treatment process to meet, as I mentioned, all the effluent discharge limits set by the EPA and the DEP. This includes phase one work was funded with a $250,000 transfer from the sewer reserves, and that covered pre-design tasks, and that was approved under Order FY 19008. And as I mentioned, I won't rehash it. The state revolving fund is what we are targeting for favorable funding, and we are also funding some of the preliminary and final design through the sewer reserve fund. So our practice is to build up sewer reserves on a consistent basis and be able to tap those funds for projects such as these. Not that this comes along very often, but we set those aside for capital improvements, and this is the appropriate use for those. But in any case, this is a $32 million appropriation. The order's been drafted by bond counsel, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a little early in the process, but the approval will give us the opportunity to apply favorably for state revolving funds. So that is 52. And I will drop down to 54. This is actually just cleaning up the sewer reline project. We didn't want to reopen the borrowing, which has all been said and done, so we're taking this out of the sewer reserves and paying $50,441.57 to close out the sewer relining project. So again, those monies are there. We don't have to add those to our borrowing, and that finishes off that project. So those are the two.
Thank you. Comments? Discussion? Mr. Wood?
Just that the neighborhood west of the plant recently has been, and for the past 20 years really, has been complaining about some odor in the area. So the town manager and I, coincidentally, this was arranged before even I think the agenda came out, coincidentally took a field trip down to the plant today and saw a lot of the processes, which Jonas said is up online. So if any of your constituents want to know what happened down at the plant, there's a lot of pictures and explanation of the whole process flow. I'm happy to see this on the path to having something done, because I think it is one of the sources of odors, and you heard the town manager talk about odor control. So I don't want to debate the item itself, but having the field trip and seeing what was going on down there was educational, and my father, who was on the planning board for over 10 years, always said, walk through the project, understand the project, and I've done that, and it was good. So thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Columbotus?
I imagine the water treatment plant is a pretty complex operation. There are pumps, filters, aerators, all sorts of things. I guess I'm wondering how old the existing equipment is, or the bulk of it, and what the lifespan is for this new facility.
It's a great question. Most of the facility is about 30 years old, I think we established today. With the exception of the RBCs, most of the RBCs, the council has replaced over the last 6 years. I think the first one broke probably my first day on the job, and when we're in process of replacing, I think, the last 3. So all the RBCs will essentially be relatively new. Our concern at the time, 6 years ago, was that we didn't want to replace too much of the RBCs because we didn't know if we'd be able to continue to use that technology. So it now appears evident that we will be able to use that technology, which is good because those RBCs are not inexpensive. So part of this project will add additional RBCs to, I believe, the 14 that we already have. And so that'll add, some treatment capabilities there. The improvements that will be designed and then constructed I can get you an engineer's more precise estimate, but I would suspect that those would be able to last another 30 years or more, given the appropriate maintenance.
And what is the term, what do you anticipate the term of that bond would be?
That would, I would suspect that that's a 30-year, but I can get that.
Okay, thank you.
Other further discussion? Okay.
Actually, just a question about the bond, since it was raised. That's against the enterprise fund, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
thank you. Now, I guess we need a motion to Budget and Finance Committee.
Correct.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Okay.
All right, loan order 53 is happening right in front of my house this week, so I will step out of the room.
Thank you for that segue.
I'll make a motion to refer to the Budget and Finance Committees.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the referrals?
Just like to hear from the town manager on it.
Mr. President, this one's a little easier. This is a water main replacement, not to be confused with wastewater. And this particular appropriation will extend our line replacement. Originally, we had limited the project scope, and upon reviewing the road condition and the condition of the pipe further down Wall Street and Hayward, it was decided to go further, and this money will allow us to replace that line and then repave the entire street in the spring of 2020.
Thank you. Question from Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mike, when it's repaved in 2020, is that part of the project, or would that come from Chapter 90 funds?
That's a great question. This covers the water line only. This doesn't cover the repaving, so the repaving comes out of the Chapter 90.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Those in favor of the to refer that to Budget Finance FinCom, those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Okay, Bill.
You can fetch Bill, that'd be great. In the meantime, we have a resolution that is brought forth by Mr. Columbotus, who went up to, there he is. Resolution RFY19-004, which is to urge the state legislature to adopt a deposit on liquor bottles, the small ones, commonly referred to as nips. Mr. Columbotus, you have anything to?
This was the fact that town of Gloucester, this is modeled after the city, I guess it's a city of Gloucester, which recently passed a similar resolution, brought to my attention by a citizen, Pat Neary. I think we all can, if you open your eyes at all along the roadways, you'll see little deposits of these little 2-inch liquor bottles called nips. There's no deposit on them, and they seem to be growing like mushrooms along our roadsides. So this simply is a resolution to urge this council to, a resolution for this council to express to our representatives in the state legislature to pass legislation which would add a deposit to these nip bottles. Currently, the only thing that have deposits on them are sparkling beer and wine, beer and soda. So this would add those types of beverage bottles. And I think this sort of makes sense because it's a market-based response to a problem. I'm not sure how big an impact it will be, but it'll certainly help. So I'm urge passage of this resolution.
Yes, Mr. Souza.
About a year ago or so, I came in here and talked about picking up a 5-gallon can full of those little nips and a short little distance from the closed-down gas station to the town line, which is probably across the front of 6 houses. Okay. I was kind of chuckled about it and asked if I really was desperate enough for the $2 that it would generate, and everyone else just kicked it aside. But prior to coming in here with that idea, I had talked to Representative D'Amelio about it, and he said that the feeling up at the State House was that they weren't going to do it because what's next? Coffee cups? So if they change their mind this time, I'm all for it, because I stopped picking them up, and they're certainly out there.
Other comments, questions? Mr. Fitzgibbons?
I'd just suggest we keep this at the council level. There's no need to go to a committee, and we can revisit it at our next meeting.
That's a motion, I'll second it.
I'll make a motion, yeah.
Motion, what was the motion?
To keep this at the council level.
Keep it at the council level. Okay, motion made and seconded. Discussion, Mr. Gallagher?
I'd support that, but I believe if I could, Mr. President, through you to Councilor Columbotus, so there is legislation already filed up there on Beacon Hill to.
Is there? I didn't know
I
that,
believe
yeah.
there is. I
Okay.
think there is, and it just hasn't gone anywhere. So we would just
Right.
be, if we support this, we would just be sending a letter to push it along.
Right.
But if it ever is approved, it will probably be approved with the caveat that each town would have to adopt it. You know what I mean? To be one of those pieces of legislation like the marijuana one. If you want it, you can do it. If not, so forth. But
I imagine it
yeah.
would be a statewide
I don't know
legislation.
if they do that. But anyway, I think there is legislation up there for this. So once that is done, then I think as we as a council could take action either to support this or not. So I have no problem keeping it here. I don't think we need to send it anywhere for recommendation. I don't think. I don't know. Do you want it to go to a committee?
I was just going to say, I think it makes sense to leave it here. It's simple,
Yeah.
straightforward enough. There's no,
Sure.
doesn't require greater deliberation.
Mr. Souza, do you have something to add?
Yeah, based on Representative D'Amelio's comment, I believed at that time that there was something up there. When you say the people up at the State House isn't interested in it, it means that they must be looking at it, all right? Why would you say that they've shown no interest in it? That's basically what he was saying. So that was over a year ago, so.
Further discussion on the amendment to keep it here. Mr. George?
I fully support the amendment. I'm going to talk about the order, so let's.
Okay, so let's get through the amendment first. So we've had our discussion on the amendment.
It's just a motion to keep it here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. The motion to keep it here. Those in favor of keeping it here?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, it'll be keeping it
It's here.
Okay, so discussion on the order itself.
So,
Mr. George?
Mr. President, so not only do I support this, I would also go as far as to say that instead of a nickel deposit on nip bottles, I would put $1 or something. And for the mere fact that, excuse me, as Mr. Souza said, I don't necessarily see this as going for coffee cups or things like that. That's littering per se. It's a problem, don't get me wrong, it needs to be cleaned up. I think there's an inherent problem with nip bottles, and where you look where they're concentrated in certain areas, I don't think it's because of people that just are throwing them out the window because they don't feel like putting them in the trash. I really think there's other factors behind it. And in order for something like this to really have teeth to it, you're going to have to hit people in the pocketbook hard so that it's going to inspire them to do the right thing. Unfortunately, I don't know if it will, but I do support this. Don't take it the wrong way. I just if we put a nickel on it, I don't necessarily think the people that are tossing them out now are going to really care about a nickel, but that's just me. Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if the legislature does anything, they're the ones that are probably gonna set the
No,
deposit.
I understand that.
So, I mean, and then it comes back to us to either adopt or not adopt, so
I
find out where that bill is, though, because bills get refiled, so
fully support it. It's just a nickel.
I support it too.
We talked about this last time, or last year, or last spring. We had somebody come in, and I forget who it was, that dumped a bag of nips on the podium. Was that Marilee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also last year, during the Bridgewater cleanup day, which is this year's April 27th, I took care of my end of town, the center, basically from where we kicked off at Music Alley down towards and just past Bridgemart, and my neck of the woods there. And we had, I think there were 7 people on my team, and we did chit marks for how many nips we found. And then we did a really nice math problem with Declan to figure out how much money it would have been at 5 cents and 10 cents. Would have been more fun if we did it for $1, though,
Yeah,
for sure.
well, Council
But-
Gallagher was nice enough to be down in my neck of the woods and 104 in Plymouth, and then up Mill Street. If we had $1 for everyone, I think we could actually, we could fund our full assessment for the school.
And
At least $3,000.
Mr. George, when you said that it was incentive, I think there might be some incentive there, maybe not to not have the nip, but maybe incentive to pick it up for those who are not having it, because that the whole thing about the nip and the issue around it is you don't want people to know you're banging them out wherever you're banging them out.
Right. I understand that.
Any other, Mr. Wood?
No, I'll just give a personal observation to that. And I didn't believe that was really one of the cause for all the litter. But I was buying, champagne in the center of town, and I saw the driver behind me get in the car after coming out of the same store with like 10 nips and open 2, drink them, and they went out the window. And, when we get back to debating this, I'll support it because it'll cause a cleanup of the roadways. But I wonder, I don't know what the solution is to stop it from happening in the first place, but I saw it firsthand, and I'd never seen that before, and I was shocked by it. Maybe I just don't pay attention enough.
If I may, just to tack on to that comment, which I agree with completely, I found during the cleanup effort we had undertaken last year that there was a much higher density of bottles on the ground in close proximity to a liquor store. So it's exactly what you've indicated, that there's a very short lifespan to those once they leave the vendor. They're consumed and out the window.
Call them sleeves, I believe. Somebody said that at the last meeting. You buy the whole thing. People buy the whole thing of them.
I thought a sleeve was a tattoo, but series
It's
of tattoos.
It's true. Any other discussion on this topic? Okay, so
It's here.
we're going to urge ourselves to adopt a deposit. So how does that go about?
Just leave it.
First
put it on the
reading,
next
so
agenda.
second reading
It's-
next time.
Okay, so we'll move that to the second reading for the next
Next
meeting.
agenda.
Second reading for the next meeting. It's got a nice ring to it. Thank you, Ann, in advance. Okay, citizens' comments. If the one citizen that has remained here, hey, thank you for sticking it out. Come on up, state your name and
It's not
address.
late either. It's early.
Okay, good evening, President Haley, members of the Town Council, Mr. Dutton, Attorney Rollins. I'm here tonight not in the capacity of school committee member, but as a resident and taxpayer. As I stated before, the school budget is not a town issue, but a state issue as well. Back when we fully regionalized, I believe it was in the early 90s, we were giving an incentive to do so. The incentive was that we would receive 100% reimbursement for transportation from the state. For a couple of years, the state did provide us with that 100% reimbursement. then the funding was cut. Last year, as recent as last year, we received 72% reimbursement. Tonight, I ask you to please reach out to Senator Pacheco and Representative D'Amelia, asking them to sign the letter that Representative Ferguson and Senator Goby are circulating, addressing the Ways and Chair of the Ways and Means in support of funding transportation at 100% in the budget. The deadline for them to sign this letter is tomorrow, March 27th, at 5 o'clock. That's why I waited till the end, so that you would each have a little homework assignment and you wouldn't forget about it. I did bring with me Senator Pacheco and Representative D'Amelia's email addresses, as well as a sample letter, so all the work is done for you. You just have to type it and send it. So if I may approach you to hand out these.
Sure. Please do.
Thank you.
Drop them off. Thank you. Would that end your comments as well? That's your final comment, is the handout. Excellent. This is great.
You want us to mail this to them or email it to them? Because they have to sign it tomorrow.
It has to be in tomorrow.
Oh, there's the email address right there.
You'd have to get that to
Even
Amazon.
UPS won't get it there that fast.
FedEx News.
Lil, before you leave, I think you have to state your name and
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Lillian Holbrook, 45 Driftwood Drive. Sorry.
Thank you for your comment and for the information. Excuse me. Okay, council comments. Mr. Fitzgibbons.
I'm going to talk about something more personal tonight than townwide, but it kind of is townwide to me. We acknowledged Jimmy Ellis's passing with a moment of silence earlier, and I just want to say I got to work for him as a summer help custodian when he was at the Williams Middle School, the old one, the one that's blown up, that used to be the old high school. And the thing I remember most about Jimmy, other than his infectious good humor, was his dedication to a job well done. I think before Bill Belichick copyrighted it, Jimmy said, "Do your job," to me several times, and his son Chad. We'd be stripping a floor in a bathroom or something, and if you've ever used one of those stripping machines, you know it's circular. It doesn't get into a corner. And he'd come up and he'd look at the wax buildup in the corner that we didn't get with the stripping machine, and he'd be like, "Do the corners. Get out your steel wool pad and do the corners too." And next to my dad, Jimmy was the person who taught me what a work ethic is. And more than that, he was a Bridgewater guy. He grew up in Bridgewater, right down the street on South Street. I mean, the Ellis family's been here forever. And so he connected me back to, like, Little League coaches named Frenchie Gramache, Joe Lazaro when Joe was just a young guy and probably still playing semi-pro ball around here, and Ralph Simons, Charlie's dad, and he made his Bridgewater my Bridgewater. And, it's not an earth-shattering event that he passed, but I did want to acknowledge him with a couple of minutes and just say, he's going to be missed very much by me, by all the people who ever worked for him and knew him. He was just a great, great guy to work for, and the town is poorer for his loss. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. George?
thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple things. One, last week, I think it was last week, the school committee budget meeting was held at the high school. Well attended, as all of the meetings in connection with the school budget have been attended. I do want to highlight and say a good job to Dennis, Bill, Ted, and Tim, not only representing the finance committee for town, but also, Tim, I thought you did an excellent job explaining how the tax rate is established. And I think there were a lot of people in that room that were under the assumption that our low tax rate means that we're undertaxing people for what we need to generate revenue for, which isn't the case. I thought you did a great job, and I think it was a good informative session. There were some things that I liked about it. There were some things that I did not like about it that I have spoken to various people about. I understand that everyone is looking out for the best interest of the students, the district, their towns. I think there's a time and a place for certain things, but I'll leave it at that. But I think one of my expectations that came out of there is that, and having discussions, we're going to need to look at our revenue projections. We're really going to need to bend on the revenue side, maybe potentially look at some cost savings as well. I've said this at the very, very beginning. When I ran for this seat, I will not pit one department against another. I am not looking to favor one department as being more important than the other, regardless of who it is. But we have a revenue issue. We've had a revenue issue for a very long time. For a long time, we had an expense issue. We did not manage our expenses very, very well. I think it came to fruition a while ago. I think we've changed that, and I'm not going to say we being me collectively. There's people in this room that have been fighting that fight for a very long time that have done an excellent job getting them in line. It's always going to be a challenge. That's the nature of the beast. But I think now we're at a point where we are going to have to look at our revenues, and we are going to have to push a little bit in regards to what we're looking at for revenue projections. I've said this to a few people, I'll say it again. I understand the fact that our free cash generates revenue for our reserves, rightfully so. But I don't think we will all look very good if next year we come out of our free cash certification in the millions of dollars while looking at departments and saying, unfortunately, we don't have the revenue to fund you on your operational side. I think that will make us all look bad from there. So I know the budget's not done yet. I know that the hard work of the committee that's going on is still going to continue, but hopefully myself and others on the council will kind of reiterate that goal, that object, and it's not just picking a number out of thin air as well. But I think we can get a lot more aggressive. And I think we've got some things in place too that can help us get through those times. The other thing is I wasn't able to attend the March 18th Charter Review Committee. I watched a little bit of the recording. Bill, as what I've seen so far, you did a really good job. I haven't seen the whole thing. I'm actually planning on having a review, and I want to thank Councilor Wood for sending me the deck. Looking at right now on April 20th at the VFW. It'll be in my precinct, but it's open to anyone who wants to come. I haven't finalized the time yet. I'm working through with the VFW, but I plan on doing this basically the same thing that was done in this chamber in regards to going over the changes, getting people comfortable with the changes, and having some discussions around them as well. But once I get that finalized, I will put that out there in the various social medias for people to attend. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chase.
Thank you. Just 2 points. I was able to attend on Saturday the Comprehensive Master Plan meeting. I thought it was well attended. I thought that there was a tremendous amount of input. I was very impressed. I was certainly very impressed too by not only the work of the committee, but of the Barrett Group for their expertise and their guidance in that matter. I'm certainly looking forward to attending the future sessions throughout the balance of the year. I also have been asked by some residents in my district to make more or less a public service announcement, as it were. But on Wednesday, April 3rd, the Bridgewater Planning Board will conduct a public hearing to take place in the council chamber at 6:30. At this session, the planning board will consider an application for a special permit to allow construction of a 16-acre solar farm on the site of the former Imhoff Farm on Auburn Street. This project has given rise to considerable concern by abutters over the past 3 years, and it is again before the planning board, having been recently remanded by order of the Plymouth Superior Court. Residents of Auburn, Walnut, and Flag Streets in particular should be encouraged to attend, as well as interested council members. And that is my announcement.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you. I want to congratulate again the 4th of July Committee for being recognized tonight for the work that they do all year long to put on the 4th of July. And as has been stated before, if you can send them in a donation to help them meet their goal of $30,000, that would be great, because it's a great day in Bridgewater on the 4th of July. This past week has been very, very busy for me, and I know a lot of my colleagues as well. Last week started off with Monday night's charter review session that Councilor Wood put together, and as has been mentioned, it was very well attended, I think, and I think that Councilor Wood did a good job explaining the changes. However, there's a lot of skepticism in that room relative to the support of it. I didn't really feel like there was too much support for the charter changes for many reasons, particularly some that we have discussed earlier regarding why can't we vote for certain things separately. So as that goes forward in a month from tomorrow, I believe, we'll see what happens with the charter review. But if that meeting was any indication, I think it's going to have a hard time passing, although people thought there were some good things in it, and there were some things they have concerns about, whether to appoint a town clerk, whether we deserve $3,000 a year, and so forth. So it was a good civic, a lot of civic engagement that night, and it was very well put together. And I hope the same goes for Councilor George's when he gets his together down at the VFW hall. And then Wednesday night, I attended with a few of my colleagues again the school budget meeting, which sheds a lot of light on the budget process that they go through, the budget process that we go through. Who has money, who doesn't have money. All that information was thrown out there with good information. It was very well. Everybody respected each other, and it's kind of a sobering thought as to, in this type of economy, as I've said before, we are in probably the best economy we have seen in many, many years. And I know there are people hurting out there, but all indications are this is the best economy we have seen in a long, long time, and yet we're having these types of struggles. And if we were ever cut local aid, or if we were ever had to cut our budgets, I don't know what type of situation we would be in, but hopefully we can come to some conclusion with the school budget and our own town budget, because we could be setting the table for some very tough budgets soon. And then Saturday, I attended with a few of my colleagues the master plan implementation meeting down at the senior center, and a lot of input was given to the consultant, whom I think will do a great job. They have a group of people that are going to put this together. They got a lot of input from probably 30 to 40 residents, and they'll do a couple more of these during the year. But some of the themes that kept coming up, and there were a lot, but some of the things that kept coming up was the positiveness of having the university in town, not the negative. It was the positive of it. A lot of discussion was about parklands and open space and what we can do for the citizens to bring those parklands into full use. A lot of comments on how safe the town is as far as crime, and that we do have good schools, although we don't have an elementary school. That was brought up as well. So there was a lot of positive feedback, I think, that was given to the consultants on Saturday, and we all participated, and for 3 hours. So I hope when I asked the town manager for one college credit, I can get that, because it was a long morning. And on that note, we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Mr. Wood?
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you to everyone that participated in the charter review. There were some really good questions there. There's some good discussion. The slide deck is now up on the town website in 2 locations, and I'll put that out on social media later so that people can see that. Sorry, a lot of feedback. I think overall, the way I look at it is this. I think in balance, there's a lot of good things for the town. But I have to think about not us sitting around the table, and I have to think about other things that the charter changes, not for now, and certainly not in the past, but what we want to look like 10 or 15 years down the road, right? And I think when I do that everything that's on the table for that makes sense. And, we've grown from a very small town in the 60s and 70s. When my grandfather bought his house across the street in 1936, the population was like 6,000. Now we're touching 28,000. We're no longer a small community, but with the 4th of July and things like that, we make it feel like a small community. And I think on balance, all the things that are in the charter update, which is a product of 5 years of effort by over a dozen people, I think benefits the town. Again, not now, not this moment, but over the long run. And that's the way I like to look at the work. I want to turn now to the budget for a second. The question about the tax rate the other night was kind of interesting, and Councilor Fitzgibbons did an excellent job saying that the tax rate is the last piece of the calculation. On the DOR website, I think it's DOR, mass.gov anyway, there's an excellent tutorial about Proposition 2.5 and the limits it puts under municipalities. It talks about the different types of debt that you can take on in that situation. And it talks about, and I think it talks about other things that we're not in a position to do now, such as in-levy debt. We did that for the Hoag Farm. We're in no position to do that now. It talks about, for the building, talks about debt exclusions. It talks about ceiling levies, and it talks, ceiling limits, and it talks about tax levies and how tax levies change, both with a 2.5% increase as well as new growth and what that type of new growth is. And you can actually have negative growth in some years if someone takes a building down. And so it really does a good job. And I think in our own process, when we get to the budget voting, we look at large numbers. We look at aggregates. We look at large department numbers. And to be fair in this process, I think that what we need to do is I always want to run in an open and transparent process on the budget cycle, right? And I think it's fair in this cycle that we show everyone the details of both sources of revenues as well as details, line item details of the budget being considered. We won't vote on the line item detail. We don't vote on line item detail, but we do vote on the large numbers, and people should see exactly what's behind those so that they're comfortable with that numbers. And I think that for the school department, I'll probably ask for the line item budget as I always do, and we should work together to show that as well so that everyone knows exactly what the composition of the budgets are. They're an open document. They should be open for information to the public. We don't want to hide anything in this process. It's an open process. We take revenues from taxes, excise taxes, and other sources of revenue, and we make use of it to support our departments, both education and other services. So I think in this cycle that we should make an effort to even make it more open. Obviously, that doesn't get down into like names of people's, but at the department level, you can see exactly where the expense lines are. The other piece of the puzzle is ambulance receipts, and we haven't gotten into that discussion either. I can tell you there's an ordinance at the council level that restricts the ability to support revenue of more than $1 million unless the council votes on that number. So when we talk about, flexibility in the revenues, we support the flexibility, or we control the flexibility. There's risk and everything else. We can have the finance director talk about that. What I was hoping the FinCom would do at some point, and I brought this up last year to the team, was to create a strategy around that number, because every year since I've been doing budgets here, we've increased the number. We talk about the risk of the number. We talk about the use of the number. It supports the general revenue line. But we don't have a strategy right now other than that $1 million level and then voting beyond that level, which comes late in the game. And so it makes some items unpredictable. The other thing is full and complete openness about how we create a revenue stream, where it comes from, what the risk is. And I don't disagree with Councilor George, but I look at the details of some of the free cash, and some things are tax taking and tax liens, and some items that don't appear more than once in a given time. We did a lot of work when the council first formed, because on the books there were a lot of properties that weren't paying taxes and caused, actually in our first few years, a negative cash flow. So negative free cash. And negative free cash was all attributed to real estate. And so we spent years cleaning that up to the point where we could actually have a revenue stream that was positive coming out each year of free cash. And there's items like this winter we had a light snow, but I heard from the town manager maybe we still spent $500,000 on snow and ice. And some of those pieces play into the whole thing. So I think the approach this year should be, I think it's always been open and transparent. And I think this year, we're going to try to make an effort, an even better effort to make it as clear as possible to everybody where the money's coming from, how it's being spent, how it's being allocated, and what the risks to some of those sources are. And hopefully we can work it out this year. Thanks.
Mr. Columbotus.
I share Mr. George's concern that we're not being proactive enough in estimating our revenues, and I think it's really admirable and prudent that we've increased free cash, and we're up above the state average for percentage of free cash. But I think in many ways we're underinvested in this town. If you drive around the roads, if you look at some of our town-owned buildings, we've deferred maintenance, and we're really not keeping things up. If you look in, one kind of telling statistic is that we are 325th out of the 351 towns and cities in the state in spending per capita. So we're not a poor town, and yet we're down in the 90th percentile or the 10th percentile at the bottom in terms of spending per capita. And we really are underinvested. If you take a look at how we address the Bridge Street Bridge, and I don't know, I can't remember the figure, but we were just asked to allocate, $50,000 or upwards of that to really essentially redo work that was done about 5-10 years ago on the cheap. And that's just not good planning. That's not good management. In contrast, if you look at Elm Street and the fact that this new, Class A commercial building, hundreds of thousands of square feet, I forgot the name, will bring in roughly $400,000 in property taxes once it goes on the books. And that private investment would not have happened unless this body made the decision to spend money on fixing that roadway and that infrastructure. So I think Mr. Georges makes some excellent points about, investing. We need to invest in our schools. We need to invest in our roadways and our staffing levels in town. If you look at the highway department, we're dramatically underfunded, and you see it. You see the result of that around the town. If you talk to strangers, the first time they drive into town or come into town, they say, wow, what great bones this town has. It's a beautiful, older, one of the older towns in the country. It's got great bones, great architecture, beautiful streetscapes, a beautiful town. But if you look a little closer, you'll see it's a little worn at the edges. So there's a lot of untapped potential there that we as a town need to stimulate private investment. So we do need to take a better look at how we estimate revenues and what we have available to make our town better. Thank you.
Mr. Souza.
Thank you. I too was at the Master Plan Committee meeting on Saturday, and I had a list of things I was going to say, but instead I would just say I'll ditto to everything that Councilman Gallagher said there, because I agree with him. People were great, the committee was great, awful lot of input from everyone. There was a lot of both sides. That was the great part about it. It wasn't just, there was 40 people there and everyone agreed, okay, there was, I said this and someone, you know, so that was very good. Everybody had that opportunity, okay. But just recently, I did some walking the streets, had to get my papers signed to get back on the ballot, and I had 124 signatures, but I talked to 47 people other than that who said, either I don't vote or I'm not registered. 47 out of look, less than 170 people, okay? Which was very, very surprising to me. But even those who didn't, some of the questions that they wanted to know was, why does the council feel that they should get paid? And what can I tell them? And then the other one was, they wanted to know why we should be changing how our clerk is elected by them, okay, rather than being appointed. They want to stay elected, okay? And they're very concerned, this was the number one item of them all, was the tremendous growth in residential and the minimum amount of growth in business. And they're very, very concerned that our tax going so far over to where the residents have to pick up all the bill, and here we are talking about tearing down, a few people mentioned this when they were tearing down a part of a school that could be used to save us money. But they're going to tear it down and cost us more money, so they got to reach deeper into their pockets if they want to stay into town. And those are the kind of things that they were talking about when I was out there. And that's something that we all are looking at anyway. We're all talking about that. We're talking about new businesses coming in. That's been my talk rate from the day I got on here, because I said day one, we senior citizens are feeling it a lot more because a lot of us are on fixed incomes, and our taxes keep going up. And people say, oh, your house. When you haven't lived in a house for 20, 30, 40 years or more, brought up your family, that's not a house. That's a home. And that's where you want to stay until you die. Okay. Hopefully peacefully, but but that's, and not too young. But they can't afford it. We have a lot of, when you look around town, there are a lot of houses for sale, but it's not new houses. It's older houses where the people have been in them for many, many years, and they just have to bail out, downsize, and go away. And then it's sad. It's I guess it's just part of life, but we have to really do a heck of a lot more to bring in more businesses, get that number going the other way again. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no comments. There is no executive session tonight.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Good night.